Dragoness PvP stands out as one of the most unique systems in MMORPGs, offering an option where gear plays no role in battles. This allows players to engage in true skill-based combat where mechanics, class knowledge, and reaction time matters more than raw stats. Hi everyone, my name is Eric, and today I want to take you through the rise and fall of Dragoness PvP, how it reached its peak as one of the most balanced and competitive PvP systems, and how it eventually fell from grace over time. But before we get into the video, here's the ever-ending disclaimer. This video is based on my personal experiences and opinions about Dragoness PvP over the years. Balanced discussions in any game can be subjective, and everyone may have different perspectives on what made certain level caps fun or frustrating. If you disagree or have your own thoughts, feel free to share them in the comments. I'd love to hear your take on it. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. It's always been a debate about which level cap era had the most balanced PvP. 32, 40, 50, and so on. I believe level 32 was the peak balanced PvP, and here's why. Level 32 cap had smaller skill pool, and it highly emphasizes its fundamentals. At level 32, classes had access to their core abilities without excessive skill upgrades or power creep mechanics. This meant players had to rely on precise execution, timing, and decision making rather than overwhelming opponents with overtuned abilities. Every move mattered, and small mistakes were more punishing, making fights more engaging and skill-driven. The era where movement and dodge still mattered. With fewer skills flooding the battlefield, movement and dodging played a bigger role. Unlike later caps where chaining iframes became the norm, level 32 PvP required well-timed dodges and smart positioning to survive. Reading an opponent and reacting correctly was way more rewarding than just spamming iframe skills on cooldown. The era where all classes have limited escape tools and encourage smarter gameplay. Another key factor that made level 32 PvP balanced was the long cooldowns on escape skills, which prevented fights from turning into an endless iframe spam. Unlike later patches where players could reset their mobility skills frequently, level 32 required calculated defensive plays rather than just relying on cooldowns to get out of bad situations. Tumble, where all classes have only had 0.3 seconds of invincibility with a 3.2 second cooldown, meaning dodging had to be precise and be mindful when to use it. Aerial evasion had a 26 second cooldown, which meant players couldn't just escape every air juggle. So if you got launched, you had to really think about when to use it. Power Tumble had a 16 to 18 second cooldown, making it more of a strategic tool for counter engagements. Because escapes were limited, players had to plan their defense carefully rather than rely on constant iframe resets. The era where skills are just tools and not meant for nuking. One of the best aspects of level 32 PvP was that skills were balanced as tools, not as instant win buttons. Unlike later caps where some skills could erase half a health bar in one hit, level 32 required players to work for their damage. Instead of crazy burst or broken EX enhancements, fights were about spacing, wherein spacing, careful positioning in the right place matters to land attacks, combo optimization where maximizing damage through proper skill chains, and also the mind games where baiting out escapes and counter-attacking efficiently. Because no skill had insane board damage, players couldn't just spam one move and expect to win. Every hit had weight. Every left click, right click, and every combo needed execution to deal meaningful damage. The era where no EX skills are ruining the balance. Another reason why level 32 PvP was superior is the absence of EX skills, which later became one of the biggest factors in breaking balance. EX skills introduced three things. First one, overtuned damage multipliers. Some skills started doing way more damage than intended. Next one, over-the-top hitboxes. Skills became too easy to land, making fights feel unfair. And the last one, unnecessary super armor and super armor break buffs. Some classes became uncatchable tanks while still dealing huge damage. So you might be asking, hey Eric, why not level 40, 50, or 60 PvP? Weren't those balanced too? The truth is, as Dragoness evolved, its PvP quality gradually declined due to power creep, imbalanced skill enhancements, and the introduction of mechanics that made fights less about skill and more about abusing broken tools. Now let's talk about 40 cap. the era where ultimate skill spam ruined risk versus reward. At level 40, ultimate skills were introduced. Ultimate skills had low cooldowns, which made them far too safe to use. Instead of a high-risk, high-reward option, ults became something players could throw out frequently without consequence. This removed a layer of strategy. Players no longer had to carefully consider when to use their most decisive move because it would be backed up quickly. As a result, PvP felt less about skillful exchanges and more about abusing high damage ults. The era where Acrobat starts to dominate. When Dragoness transitioned to level 40 cap, one of the biggest PvP balance shifts happened. Acrobats became dominant. And guess what? Why did that happen? Largely because of tip-tops. So Erick, you're telling me it's because of tip-tops why Acrobat became broken? Why is that? Yep, it's all because of tip-tops. Tip-tops or butterfly float for NA players was a passive skill that dramatically enhanced acrobat movement and iframe potential, making them 1. Harder to catch, 2. Harder to punish, and the last one her ability to reset fights constantly, compared to 32 cap where acrobat was still a strong, slippery class but still had limits. 40 cap turned them into a near unkillable monsters in the hand of skilled players. It killed class variety, making it the best class in the game and one of the most viable classes to this day. So shout out to the acrobat mains out there, including me, shout out to myself. Yup, we're the problem, it's us. I acknowledge we're not good at the video game and just carried by self-class kid. And I'm sane enough to look at the mirror and reflect on myself. You dirty individual. This is the reason why I made an archer named Virus, just in case Identity would pursue 40 cap PvP. Alright, moving on to another level cap. The era where second specializations created, 50 cap. Level 50 introduced second specializations, but the problem was that not all classes were treated equally. Some received overpowered skills, while others got mediocre upgrades that didn't keep up. This led to a clear tier gap between classes, where certain specializations dominated and others struggled to keep up. On top of that, skill EX enhancements were introduced, and just like with second specializations, some classes benefited way more than others. Instead of refining class balance, these new additions widened the gap, making PvP more about who had the stronger kit rather than who was the better player. But wait! There's more. The era where the acrobat problem continues to grow. The cancer classes of the game, Windwalker and Tempest. Windwalker's Showtime enabled infinite pressure. Showtime turned Windwalkers into relentless high-speed nightmares. It reduced cooldown significantly, letting them spam skills non-stop, let them chain combos easily, making them feel unstoppable, and it made them impossible to pin down, as their already strong mobility got even crazier. Windwalkers were already hard to hit, but Showtime turned fights into a one-sided chase game. Now we go to Tempest. Tempest and her Hurricane Dance and high damage by passing iframes. Hurricane Dance gave Tempest an extremely powerful burst combo that, first, it had a fast, hard-to-react animation making dodging difficult, and second, ignored iframe timing, catching players even when they used escape moves. Before 50 cap, acrobats relied on mobility and chip damage, but with the Hurricane Dance, Tempest could now delete opponents instantly with minimal effort. This is also the era where Gladiators debuted in 50 cap, introducing a high-risk, high-reward melee playstyle that became a nightmare for anyone caught in range. Their new tools included Evasion Slash, allowing them to attack while repositioning, making them difficult to counter because they're the ones countering you. A mix of high mobility and sustained pressure, turning Gladiators into the best aggressive melee class. With Evasion Slash, Gladiators were hard to lock down, hard to punish, and devastating at close range. The era where the downfall of balanced PvP, 60 cap and beyond. At level 60 and beyond, things got even worse. Power creep became more apparent as damage numbers skyrocketed, fights become shorter, and some classes could delete opponents with just one mistake. Super armor stacking became more excessive. Certain classes could ignore knockdowns and interrupts, making trades one-sided. Cooldowns became more forgiving. Escape tools and iframe tools became too frequent, removing the need for precise dodging and punish play. The era where introduction of spin-offs, new classes, and awakenings. As newer content rolled out, Dragoness introduced spin-off classes, new character classes, and the awakening system, all of which further contributed to PvP's imbalance. First off, the spin-off classes. These alternative versions of existing classes such as Silver Hunter, Dark Avenger, Arc Heretic, Black Mara, etc. often had busted kits that outperformed their original counterparts in PvP. Their skills were designed with higher damage output, easier combos, and additional mechanics that made them difficult to counter with older classes. New character classes: Assassin, Lancea, and Machina. With each expansion, Dragoness introduced new character classes that drastically shifted the PvP meta. Assassin in 70 cap and its specializations Raven Reaper, then later Light Fury and Abyss Walker. It had mobility that outclassed many existing classes. Raven, in particular, had chainable iframe moves and strong rage projectiles that made it difficult to punish. Lancea was released in the early 80 cap. As a high-speed melee class, Lancea's high mobility and iframe heavy kit allowed her to weave in and out of fights effortlessly, making her frustratingly hard to catch. Machina was released on the late 80 cap. She was built with high survivability, mobility, and absurd super armor skills, making her one of the most oppressive classes in PvP. The era where also the Awakening system was introduced. With level 90 came the Awakening system, which granted all classes new powerful abilities that significantly boosted their damage, survivability, and utility. Instead of refining PvP balance, Awakenings widened the gap between older and newer classes, making PvP feel more like a battle of raw power rather than skill. As a result, Dragoness PvP lost the strategic and skill-based nature that defined its earlier level caps, becoming more about who had the most broken kit rather than who had the better mechanics and game sense. All of this combined diluted the skill-based combat that made level 32 PvP so great. Instead of thoughtful engagements, PvP started revolving around spammy, overpowered abilities with little room for counterplay. The era where the decline of true competitive PvP. As more skills, awakenings, and balancing missteps piled up, PvP lost the core identity that once made it fun. By the time we reached later caps, it was clear that identity was designing skills for PvE first, PvP second, leading to a frustrating experience for competitive players. This is why I believe level 32 was the peak of Dragoness PvP. It had the perfect balance of skill expression, risk versus reward, and class identity without unnecessary power creep. At level 32, every class still had clear strengths and weaknesses without being overpowered. The skill ceiling was determined by how well you used your abilities, not by how broken your EX enhanced kit was. At level 32, every class had a fighting chance. It had more class variety. Because skills didn't have absurd scaling or busted EX buffs, PvP in level 32 felt more honest and competitive. No class had a complete unfair advantage, and matchups were decided by player skill rather than class tier lists. In later caps, the disparity between second specialization classes became too big. Some classes had unfair tools, ridiculous frame advantages, or unreasonably strong EX skills while others got left behind. In contrast, level 32 PvP kept things simple and let skill shine through rather than class power creep. Where it was back then, punishment was more rewarding. Since escape options were limited, catching an opponent actually meant something. If you successfully landed a combo, you could capitalize on it instead of having your opponent iframe out instantly. This made PvP feel more rewarding and emphasized skillful reads, baiting escapes, and proper combo execution. Additionally, because of aerial evasion had such a long cooldown, air juggles were more meaningful. You couldn't just mash to break out of every launch, you had to be mindful of when you used it, adding another layer of strategy to both offense and defense. Now my final verdict about the current state of Dragoness PvP on the main server. Dragoness PvP was no longer about skill. It was about who had the most busted kit. With so many factors that made the game broken, Dragoness PvP lost what made it great. What was once a fair, skill-based system became a game of who can press the most overpowered skills. And that wraps up the whole video of the history of Dragoness PvP. If you enjoy this type of content and appreciate the effort I put into making this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more deep dives like this. Also, if you reach 1k subs, I promise that I'll make an effort to do facecam live streams, but there's no guarantee I'll be doing it every stream. Also, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. What was your favorite era of Dragoness PvP? Do you agree that level 32 was the peak, or do you think another cap was better? That's it for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.